Good morning, everybody. Today we'll be focusing on the idea of the mother in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo Savitri. And we're at a period of time very close to the birthday of Mira Alfasa, who Sri Aurobindo declared to be the incarnation of the Divine Mother. And for those who follow Sri Aurobindo's teachings, the Mother became the center and is the center of the yoga as it unfolds to the disciples of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. The integral yoga, which is the teaching of Sri Aurobindo, is, as he himself says, the joint creation of himself and the Mother. And it is a great opportunity for us at this time to bring our consciousness, to bring our concentration, to focus on who is the Mother. What is the Mother's role? Why is she given this central place in the integral yoga? And what she offers and what we can offer to her. So this is the scope of our consideration today in terms of Savitri. So Savitri, as we've already started doing a set of meditations on Savitri, this is the second one, is Sri Aurobindo's epic poem, which he started very early in his writing. The earliest traces of Savitri, the earliest attempts at Savitri were made by Sri Aurobindo when he was in Baroda, just after he came back from England to India. And at that time, he also wrote another poem, a longish poem called Love and Death, which deals with a similar theme. So we can see the importance of this theme in Sri Aurobindo's own understanding, consciousness, consideration. The idea that with the power of love, death can be conquered. This is the central idea. And this idea, as it unfolds in the poem Love and Death, which is also in a way by which Sri Aurobindo contacted the Indian tradition. So it is an attempt to, after he came back from England, an attempt to assimilate the entire cultural and mythological background of India. And that's part of his message that he's absorbing, deriving from the tradition. This is an ancient trope, one may say, love conquering death. With Savitri, he continued refining that particular myth, story. He continued refining it and worked on it till the end of his life. So he was making changes to it even in his, one may say, his last days, his last production, as far as his writings go, in Pondicherry. So what is the difference one may consider between something like Love and Death and Savitri? Thematically, there is a similarity. It is the power of love conquering death. But in Savitri, this idea is presented as a cosmic or metaphysical idea, that it is not merely the idea of a individual and the power to assert a certain primacy over death, but that this the form of this is almost like the very purpose of creation itself. The creation is something that presumes within it a power to overcome death, and that which can overcome death is love. This is the cosmic background to the individual act, you may say. Moreover, this cosmic background is what one might call a time image. By time image, I mean some people have used the term archetype, but I like to use the term time image because it is a kind of archetype that gives us an image of the structure of time. The structure of time, we mean that we can understand the relationship between being and becoming through this image. So, what is the image? The image, which is what Sri Aurobindo is drawing into Savitri, is that of an intervention. So there is an image, as it were, of something that is lacking, something that is there but forgotten. And out of that forgetting, there is a call. And to the call, there is a response. And this response is coming from another zone, as it were, a zone that is forgotten, but at the same time that is immanent, that is within everything. So there is a kind of, they use the term panentheism now, which is a term that means that there is a transcendent that is also immanent. Something seems to be outside, but is actually deeply inside. So it's really a kind of a transcendental geometry, you may say, a topology that defies the division between the hierarchy of the above and the below. It is above and also it is within. This is the way in which panentheism looks at it. And for Sri Aurobindo, this is the structure of becoming. Becoming is the very meaning of time. And becoming happens due to a series of pulsations. These pulsations are repetitions of a certain structure that is constantly calling to that which is not present but is locked in the present. And as a response to that, there is, as it were, a power that intervenes and unlocks that which is in the present but hidden in it. So this is the structure. This structure Sri Aurobindo derives from the Veda. So we can see that he came upon this particular story when he first started writing the story from the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, it is a story of love conquering death, in the sense that it's a story that is told to the eldest brother of the Pandavas, Yudhishthira, who is at a sage's hermitage, and in the course of the conversation, he is ruminating. Of course, he is guilty in a way of the entire unfolding of the war that occurs, at least at the imminent uh, start of the war, because he has been involved in this strange dice game, a kind of an, again, a metaphorical image, a game of chance, which he loses. In other words, he has a fatal flaw. That fatal flaw is the flaw of the gambler. He gambles. He gambles with his own life, and he gambles with what is not his own life, with the life of his brothers and his wife and his kingdom, all the people that he represents in the kingdom. He gambles with it, and he loses. That's the fatal flaw. And the entire burden of what he loses is represented by Draupadi. So he, in his conversation, is in a way expressing his contrition. And he's saying, is there anybody more virtuous, greater than Draupadi? And that's when the sage tells the story of Savitri to him. It's a story told to say that the power of femininity, the power of the female, is a tremendous power, a Shakti. It is not just some kind of a power of compassion or a power of solace, in which image men tend to see women, but a power which is far surpassing anything else in the universe by its ability to express the purest love. This is the story that the sage tells Yudhishthira. And he tells the story in terms of a king and the fact that he doesn't have an heir, and he does a kind of a yajna, which is a ritual, austerities to call on the gods to give him an heir. But by a strange twist of the god's will, what he's given is a daughter rather than a son. So this starts complicating the picture right from the beginning. Instead of an heir who will become another king, he's given a daughter. And of course, the story unfolds, but Sri Aurobindo tells us from the very beginning that this is a repetition, already a repetition in the Mahabharata of a story that has other dimensions to it in the Veda. And he hints at why he's tracing it back to the Veda. Firstly, the metaphor itself, the time image itself, makes more complete sense when we put it into the context of Vedic ideas. Secondly, he points out that all the names of the characters are Vedic names. These are not names that are common to an understanding that arises in the Mahabharata. In the sense that Savitri herself is a goddess that appears in the Veda. She is the goddess of the divine word. So one of the principal hymns, see what happens with the Veda is whatever the Veda meant at a certain time, Even today, when we are talking about history, our present understanding of what the history of Indian spirituality was is that there was the first layer of what we today call Hinduism that people today call Vedism. They don't know what it was. They know that there was a certain kind of relationship with the Veda. It is not a relationship of rituals. The relationship of rituals and a conversion of the Veda to a social symbol that is propagated through ritual takes place at a certain point of time in the northwest of India. This is the largely accepted present understanding. This phase moves from Vedism to Brahmanism. Brahmanism means a number of things. The term Brahman is used in the Veda to mean the divine word. This is what gives a certain kind of understanding to the Veda as what is called Shabda Brahman. Shabda Brahman means the word as the divine word, the word as the divine. And this is interpreted to mean that the corpus of the Veda is a divine corpus, a corpus that is given by the divine and meant to be used without interpretation. There's no interpretation possible to it. It is a object, just like a stone thrown by God, to be utilized for bringing God into the world. And how is it to be utilized? So this term Brahman is then related to a body of text called the Brahmanas and to a kind of a priestly class called the Brahmana. So there is a kind of a constellation of ideas around this word Brahman. This is why we call it Brahmanism, which is the utilization of the Veda as Shabda Brahman using the ritual understanding of the Brahmanas by Brahmins who are priests to bring about a ritualized understanding of all the activities of society: birth, marriage, death, the coronation of kings, the bringing of rain, the changing of seasons. All activities are brought about due to the grace that flows from the recitation of the Vedas done through a ritual by a Brahman. So this kind of a utilization of the Vedas shifts us into a new age of history, a Brahmanical age. And already we can see that meanings shift, understanding shift. And even in the kind of meaning that we are getting from the Mahabharata, where the king is looking for an heir, we see that there is a kind of a social convention that has become normative. And so looking for an heir becomes the reason for calling the gods. This is part of the ritualization of society based on ideas of the Veda. But Sri Aurobindo, going back, is saying that what happens to the main ideas of the Veda is that they're lost in their essence, but certain nuggets are retained for those rituals. And if we see, there are some verses of the Veda even today when there are pujas, today this particular ritualization continues. It continues not in the Brahminical sense of using Vedic mantras as it was done in the Brahminical age, but in a more hybrid sense of a meeting between non Vedic traditions that became what are called the Tantras and these Vedic traditions, the Brahminical traditions, to form what are called pujas now. In a puja, there is a mixture of several things that are coming out of the tantras: gestures, sound syllables, mantras, and sayings from the Vedas. So, what today in the stream of time has come to us from the Veda are nuggets which have remained. They're like memes, they're like certain atoms of ideas that have traveled through time and, in a way, represent the secret of the Veda that has, that has a place in our world, but we don't know what it means. It's become like those uh, unknowing seeds that remain, so to say. And of course, as we all know, that which is the most valued, sort of nugget from the entire corpus of the Veda is called the Gayatri. So the Gayatri mantra, which is a mantra which all the pujas use, because that's the first mantra by which a particular deity, whoever that deity is invoked as the divine. So there is a Gayatri for Ganesha, there's a Gayatri for Saraswati, there's a Gayatri for Vishnu, Gayatri for Shiva, or whoever it is, there is a Gayatri. The Gayatri looks upon that deity as the solar godhead. The Gayatri mantra is essentially saying, I meditate on that form of the solar godhead, not just the presence of it, but the power of it. The power of it. I meditate on the power of the solar godhead to intervene, to come down, and to transform. This is the essence of the Gayatri mantra. And this is the essence of Savitri. The Gayatri mantra is invoked to Savitri. That's why it begins with Tat Savitur. Savitra, Surya Savitra is the name of the sun. And Savitri is the grace power of the sun, the Shakti, goddess, that is the outflowing of the grace of the sun. And so this is the Vedic origin of Savitri. And Sri Aurobindo points out the names of all the characters in Savitri: Ashwapati, the lord of the horse; Dyumatsena, the lord of the shining hosts; every other name in it, Satyavan, the being of truth, are all terms that belong to a corpus of terms that are from the Veda. So this is exactly how we find Sri Aurobindo takes this idea, which, as I discussed, is like a time image that he finds in the Veda, and he reads the story of the Mahabharata in terms of the time image of the Veda. But that's not all. He's also saying this time image is alive. It was alive, and it is alive, and it will be alive. So, in a way, he's pointing to the intervention that he and the mother themselves represent in this time. From that point of view, it's an autobiography of both Sri Aurobindo and the mother. It's a time image that has replicated in historical time in our times. So that's the way in which Savitri has to be understood. So when we talk about the Divine Mother in Savitri, it is the Divine Mother as a principle coming from the solar origin and transforming the earth as the very meaning of time that happened in the origin. What is the origin? This is the reason why Savitri begins with the symbol dawn. The symbol dawn is the image of an origin. And if you read the symbol dawn, you'll see that it is pregnant with this idea of an origin which is not an origin because there is no origin. Time is made up of the illusion of an origin. It's necessary to time. But it is an origin that always traces back to an earlier origin without end. So, even when the origin of the symbol dawn begins, there is within it a remembrance of slain pasts. Pasts, innumerable pasts. Pasts that have tired the soul that is to be reborn. So much so that in the origin itself is a sense of wanting to return back to the death from which it came. That is the image of the involution. All these are time images. By time image, I mean something which actually belongs to time but came from outside time. In other words, there is no beginning or end to it, yet it is a necessity of the unfolding of time. So this is, sorry, yes.
Just because our human mind can't conceive of no beginning, like everything has to have one, but how is the moment of involution not the origin? I mean, I know it's not the origin of what is involved, but in terms of the manifestation.
Yeah, I think this is exactly why the meditation on Savitri, so to say, involves our confrontation of this paradox. It is a paradox. This is the reason why all these studies, all these meditations are pushing us to complicate our linear understanding of reality and time. That in a way, time coexists with the timeless always. And we are extruded into time. We are pulled out of the timeless into time. And we have to, in our meditation, arrive at that place where the timeless and the time are coexisting. That's the origin. That is the origin. The never beginning origin. So that there is a sense that there is a deep, beginningless depth to time, to history. And yet, this deep, beginningless depth is constantly a unfolding of the timeless, that which is outside time. So to confront that and to experience that, to live in that, that is the call, in a way, of this meditation, you see. Because th- this loss, which was even in talking about the history of the Veda and the conversions that take place in time, we are seeing this, how we run away, as it were. This is the idea of the exile. We're exiled from origin. In talking about origin, we are already exiled from origin. Because origin always is. And at the same time, origin never was. And at the same time, origin was at some remote antiquity that we can never plumb because it always points to an even earlier arche. So these ideas are experiences. And it is towards that experience that the ideas are forms of contemplation. So I will read a text slowly and we'll discuss it, but it will bring us into a contact with that's the aim at least, to bring us into a contact with the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother plays a central role in Sri Aurobindo's teaching. So it is not surprising that she also plays a central role in Savitri. It is indeed the power of the Divine Mother that is incarnated as Savitri. Prior to this incarnation, Ashwapati, the father of Savitri, in his seeking for the solution to the riddle of ignorance, reaches in consciousness to the Supreme Divine Mother beyond the cosmos and at the gates of the transcendental unknowable. So this is the switch that Sri Aurobindo does to the story in the Mahabharata. Ashwapati is not looking for an heir. Ashwapati is what Sri Aurobindo calls the yogi king. And here the term king is not a feudal term. It's a very interesting term that he's looking back to the king, because some contemporary scholars of Sri Aurobindo studies, a British scholar by the name of Alex Wolfers, is speaking about a new kind of imperialism, that Sri Aurobindo is proposing. By imperialism is meant something related to a king. And the new imperialism that Sri Aurobindo is proposing in the period of his political days is the imperialism of the spirit. So he uses the term Swaraj and Samraj. Swaraj, which are terms related to the king. Raj is to rule. Swaraj is self-rule, which is a term that becomes very important to the nationalistic movement of India when Sri Aurobindo was there, and all the way till the end. Gandhi is talking about Hind Swaraj. The Bande Mataram is full of the word Swaraj. In fact, that entire phase is a phase of Swaraj. So, in nationalistic history, Sri Aurobindo is saying that self rule, national self rule, is based on individual self rule. And rule, which is sometimes seen as a pejorative term in our times because we think about mastery as a imposition on the other. But the power of the will to know by identity and to unfold that which is the truth of that itself is Swaraj. Sri Aurobindo from the Upanishads is using the term ajnana, knowledge by will. Knowledge is of a variety of kinds. There is a knowledge of doing. We may plan all that we want, but when we actually go to do something, variables come into it that we could never plan. And there is a knowledge of action. In the knowledge of action, will is involved. And the will is a will of identity with other wills. This is the power of a will that finds its source in a single will. This is the entire idea of the Gita. What is to be done? What is to be done can have 1,000 answers depending on our particular relationship with the world, but also depending on the level of consciousness in which we exist. However, there is one thing to be done, and that one thing to be done is different for everybody. But it is arrived at through a contact with the divine will. This is the reason why the Isha Upanishad is called the Isha Upanishad. Isha meaning Lord. Isha means Lord. So this notion of the Lord, of the King, of the Master, Sri Aurobindo will turn it into the term the Master of the Yoga. The Master of the Yoga is the Lord of the horse. And so this Master, the Master of the Yoga who is outside us and inside us, ultimately the Master of the Yoga is us, each one of us. So the King, from that point of view, is the divine that is to be realized by the individual and the collective. If that is done, we arrive at a divine anarchy. It's no rulership from the top. It's a rulership from the inside. These are the conditions of a divine anarchism. And that is what Alex Wolfers says is the idea of a new imperialism. An imperialism that flips the old idea of imperialism on its head and makes it into an anarchism. A divine imperialism is a divine anarchism. It is in that sense that Ashwapati is a king. See, the lord of the horse is a king. And what he's looking for are the conditions of a divine anarchism. That is the very meaning of this book. He sees this fact that we live a life that is divided. We live a life that is refracted in another medium from the truth, which is why we need conventions, we need symbols, and we need some kind of hierarchy to control us because we don't have a direct contact with the truth. An individual here or there may find that contact. but the world remains what it is. This is the essence of Ashwapati's conversation with the Divine Mother when he reaches the doors of the unknowable. Because he has this experience that there is a realm of truth that can manifest. It's not just a static realm of the truth. See, this is a really big difference between the idea of a truth which is transcendent, outside us, static, and because we can't find a way by which we can arrive at a perfect existence on earth, we can aspire to get out and become one with that. Yes.
Then this whole thing, if this is the essence of king, then it's just a total distortion that succession has anything to do with genetics.
Yeah.
Or, how did that even come about? That the heir is the son and the successor and all of that. It's like you'd think it would be like they choose the Dalai Lama, for instance, that it has to be a demonstration of certain qualities of consciousness that would determine succession, not family.
Yeah. So this becomes, it's an interesting and it's actually a very profound question because in the Gita, this question is related to what is called Vibhuti Yoga. See? And Vibhuti Yoga is also related to very ancient ideas that come up in various indigenous religions and practices. For example, in Shinto, which becomes the basis of the imperialism of Japan. The idea is that the divine is unequally present in manifestation. So that you go out into the street, you see lots of, into the park, you see lots of stones, but there's one stone there that is expressing the divine to a greater extent than others. And that calls you. See? And that becomes your object of worship. See? In a similar way, they're saying that individuals express more or less of the divine. So they can see some people inborn. A Shakespeare is a born poet, as they say. We can try to be Shakespeare and we can probably become great poets, but there'll be a quantum that is extra over there. So the idea of the divine right of kingship, as you're saying, is coming from this notion that divine essence, Savitri herself, one may say, is outflowing through a certain genetic stream. So that there is a certain kind of, this is the idea, right? So this is the idea. I think already it's a distortion. So there's a distortion. But there is a partial truth to it. What Sri Aurobindo is saying is that these partial truths belong to nature. And we are here to overcome nature. We are here to get to a truth that is underlying nature. If we take nature to be constant, then we are left with these kind of things. We are left to accept the inequality of the world, though we can see that underlying that inequality, there is an essence that is the same. If we can see that, then the inequality doesn't matter. So if everybody sees that there is something like that. But that's not our experience. And this kind of understanding easily lends itself to the play of power. This is what has happened over time when we talk about the divine right of kingships. To talk about Shinto and Japan, we can see that very clearly. See? This whole idea about the return of the king around the time of the second, after the Meiji, the sort of, action of the West, of America on Japan, forcing it to open its, ports, created a revolution inside Japan where the king was reinstated under the guise of this understanding, and ultimately led to a imperialism that what actually the king was not that much involved in, but what the king was controlled by, which is always a collusion between the people of power and the people of knowledge. See, led to imperialism of this distorted variety. Yes.
So this inequality, can you think of this also as a functional thing of the manifestation? Because otherwise, that the evolution has to take place in a logical. It has to have like a making sense type of structure, right?
Yeah, it is functional. It is functional, and at the same time, if we actually look at it, because everything is the same but manifesting different properties, these properties may be more in some sense and less in some other sense. You see, a king is not necessarily a priest. This is again something that comes into the history of the world, where Plato is looking for the philosopher king. See, while in let's say India, there is the idea of the Janaka is a philosopher king in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, but he's not given primacy over the sages, so to say. See, there is functional expression that is in a way, like a siddhi that is developed as well, because somebody puts the energy into it. They may come with a extra something, but they have to put the energy into it. But it overlaps with other similar functions in others. So it isn't that somebody is supreme over anybody else in all ways. So in this kind of notion of a divine anarchy, you don't have this functional idea that is static. Functions are also dynamic. So there is an unfolding in which there is an understanding of these dynamic functions.
For example, in the Life Divine that Aurobindo says that even to be less or smaller, equal if not more, a concentration is required from the divine. So it is an intentional inequality. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, once the hierarchism is gone from it, once one knows that this what we are calling this divine imperialism is equal in all beings, the self-rule of the janitor is no less than the self-rule of the manager, so to say. You see, so from that point of view, just like the Isha Upanishad begins, all this is for the habitation of the Lord. So there is no less lordship in anybody, even if they're doing a minor job, and that is understood by the whole.
In fact, even the flow of judgment. We take judgment as a negative thing, but that's also a divine creation. Right?
Yes.
So that's kind of part of the evolution itself. And there is no judgment if there is no inequality.
Yeah. No, there is an unequal distribution of forces. That is always the case, and there is the essence of the one. And the knowledge of the two together make up a divine imperialism, if you want to call it that. Yeah. Yes.
Is this whole thing, the importance of the will, the essential thing of the will, is this why when Aurobindo talks about consciousness, he'll hyphenate it with force?
Yeah.
As like...
This is Savitri, right? Consciousness force. Mm-hmm. There are two terms he uses. One of them is Chit Shakti, and the other is Chit Tapas, right? Chit Shakti is sometimes translated as consciousness force, and Chit Tapas is consciousness energy or consciousness concentration. You see, So it's the concentration of consciousness that flows out as the force of consciousness. So, Ashwapati, as we see, this is the marked change from the Mahabharata story, where Ashwapati here is a king, not looking for an heir, but looking for a change in the conditions of the earth that will bring about this knowledge of the manifestation of the truth uh, to bear on the cloud of ignorance which separates us and turns us into symbols rather than into flowing manifestations of truth. There's the difference between the world of mind and the world of supermind. So once he reaches this zone, this border, a border that is transcendental and that easily pushes us towards escape. And the way Sri Aurobindo puts it, it is not just a mental thing. It is not just because we thought this is a bad place, a prison, and we need to escape, that the transcendent attracts us with the kind of attraction of the outside. But it is even the person, Ashwapati, who comes to the gates of that division with an intense aspiration for transformed life. Even that person at those gates experiences such a widening, such a infinity, that they forget what they came with. At the borders of the unknowable, all you were is going to get wiped out. So it's not even a question of some ulterior aim to get there. There is no power. All your power, all your gathered strength, all your tapas is like naught over there. This is the ancient image of the rivers going to the ocean. As soon as they go to the ocean, the river is cancelled. There is no river. It's just the ocean.
So when you get to the portal, you have to run and leap, otherwise you'll forget.
I mean, even then, you run and leap into your own extinction, right?
Yeah,
So
that's the point.
here, what happens is that he's gathered his aspiration and made it so intense that at that point he is forgetting, but the intention in him has evoked a response from there. This is the beauty of that entire passage. That though he doesn't have the power to withstand the dissolution of the self, that which has brought him there speaks to him and says, it's too early to rejoice. This is not the goal for which you came here. Remember, it reminds him. Remember is a very powerful word because remember relates to time. It's memory, its origin, it's where did it begin. Get back into time. Realize that the transcendent is not just timeless, but time also belongs to it. See, this is partly why Ramakrishna, when he had his great Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where the Advaitin Guru ultimately says to him, you have to get rid of the image of Kali if you want to enter into the Advaita, the zone of absolute oneness. And he sees in his vision Kali extending her sword and saying, cut off my neck, so that you can go beyond me. And he does it because she asks him to. And then he experiences the unknowable, the ocean, the dissolution of all things. And when he comes back, he says, what did you realize? I realized there's no place where the Divine Mother is not there. In other words, he experiences the fact that time is also a power of the timeless. It does not get erased. It exists there. And that aspect of the timeless, which does not cancel the rivers that flow into the ocean, but in which all those rivers retain their identity, that is the supermind. That is not the dissolution of all things. That is both the dissolution and the preservation of all things. It's a paradox. Everything is a paradox. Yes.
So we'll step back on when you said you were talking about the illusion of ignorance and how that makes us symbols and we can't go beyond symbols. And it seemed to me that when you were talking about the river continuing in the ocean, then what the symbol was, which prevented you from being in the ocean because you were stuck in time or in some limitation.
Yeah.
The symbol goes away, but the knowledge of what the symbol represented is still there.
Exactly. Because the symbol, this is a famous debate between Shankara and Ramanuja. Of course, they belong to different times. Shankara is earlier, and Ramanuja comes later. And Shankara says that what we call the Atman, the soul of the individual, is also a illusion. Atman is nothing but Brahman. To say that, as the Upanishads say, Atman is nothing but the Brahman, is to also say that the moment the Atman realizes that, the Atman is dissolved. And Ramanuja comes along and says that if the Atman is dissolved by the power of Brahman, it remains a seed within Brahman because it arose from Brahman, and at any point it can arise again. There is no dissolution. So it is that idea that you're exactly what you're saying, that the idea with a capital I, that's why Sri Aurobindo uses the word real idea for supermind. The real idea, the reality of it is still there in it. It's the idea that is the river, the symbol that is known, along with the fact that it is nothing other than a face of the one. Yes, Margaret?
So when you were talking about the supermind and the timelessness exists with time in the supermind, and that particular understanding of Sri Aurobindo's, although he mentions there has been other rishis that, or maybe Ramakrishna, that realized the supermind, is that concept also goes back in the lineage, or the timeless and time in the supermind, is that specific to Sri Aurobindo?
No, this, as Sri Aurobindo points out, this is the very essence of the Veda.
Okay.
This is also the essence of the Isha Upanishad, which he utilizes to write the Life Divine. What is different is that historically, one may say that what Ashwapati and what the whole story of Savitri is talking about itself is a symbol, talking about symbols, right? Itself is a symbol that repeats in time, and now is the time for that symbol to become fully understood to a generalized nature. That's the difference. So he says something like, the rishis of the Veda knew this and took steps towards its attainment. That's why he's talking about the descent of supermind, right? Which is not just a personal attainment, but a universal. When we are talking about a collective, uh, self-rule, that in a way you can take the entire spiritual teaching of Sri Aurobindo back to his nationalistic days. It's a river. The revolutionary of the nationalistic days is the same person who's writing the Life Divine. It isn't a break and a new teaching. All those ideas are there, only they've been realized by that time. Yeah.
There's a saying in Bengali called Hate Hari Bhanga.
Yeah.
That is breaking the container in the market.
Yeah.
So it's like breaking the secret
Yeah.
in front of all.
Yeah. Right.
I just thought of it.
Yeah. So this Ashwapati comes to the gates of the transcendental unknowable. His passionate dialogue with her results in her accepting to incarnate as his daughter. So this is exactly what is happening. That he's saying that she's saying to him, "You've come with a certain aspiration," but she's also giving a caveat and saying, "It's yours. Don't forget it, but it's yours. And you can attain to something greater. But don't ask for it for others because they're not ready. And a truth too early will destroy them. They have to be prepared for it." And Ashwapati says he invokes that depth of time that I was talking about. He invokes the depth of time and says, forever things have remained like this. Now is the time for it to change. You have to intervene. Your intervention introduces a new principle by which things can change. So without that, you can talk about preparation and all that, but all that preparation is a meandering in the infinite. The mother has pointed out that the difference between the supramental as a power that guides the evolution and nature by itself is that nature, as she says, has all eternity in its hands. It does its experiments and it doesn't really care how long it takes to meander towards that evolutionary telos. It's a kind of some philosophers have used the term neo-finalism. That there is no telos, but there is experiments towards something that we intuit as a telos, but they're just experiments. There is no rush to it. While the descent of the supermind is like a magnet that starts pulling in an accelerated way all the elements towards the evolution of the end that it sees as the goal. So that whatever happens is a preparation. It's already the preparation that is guided by that power. This is what he asks, that you incarnate so that that future can start manifesting even here and now. He results in her accepting to incarnate as his daughter and sets into action forces that could transform human existence into a divine one. The Divine Mother, incarnating as Savitri, enters the relations of the world participating in its play, and eventually vanquishing death. So, in a way, her life on earth as Savitri becomes that which intimately gathers all the life of the earth into herself, and it achieves that transition of the frontier that by our own effort we can't. And so Sri Aurobindo points out about the work of the avatar, not so much the Gita. See, the notion of the avatar, there's many different ideas of the avatar. The Gita's idea of the avatar is that when things really fall into deep falsehood, the avatar is incarnated to, it's like pushing the probabilities and making this creation move into something which otherwise it would drop into the dissolution or the chaos. Yes, Swaha.
Oh, it just seemed ironic in a way when she said to him, "But it's yours. Don't ask it for other people." But then her whole incarnation was making things possible for the earth and for humanity.
Yeah.
In a much wider sense.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you see that that entire dynamic at the borders of the unknowable, where as Savitri puts it, as Sri Aurobindo puts it, he's about to be wiped out. He's forgetting everything. It's all being erased from his consciousness. This being comes and says to him, "No, this is not why you've come. You've come here to ask for something. Gather yourself together. This is not the end." And he asks, and she says, "Don't ask for others." It's a ploy, because it's like saying, it's just like same thing happens with Savitri. She vanquishes death, but there he is at the gates of the sun, saying, "Welcome to the realm of everlasting day." It's a parallel of that in Ashwapati's case. It's here. This is why you've come. Yeah, you can have it for yourself, but it's really a ploy to get him to remember why he's really come, to equal the intensity of his aspiration with the power of the supermind. This is what's going on. And he manages to do that, and he gives this passionate plea. And she says, of course, she takes the credit for herself. She says, "Oh, very good, you've spoken my words." It's like you've just become a ventriloquist and spoken my words. And she agrees to come. But that's what's happening there. Thus, one may say the whole of Savitri revolves around an act of the Divine Mother. The mother says, that famous statement, what Sri Aurobindo represents is not a teaching, not even a revelation. It is a direct action from the Supreme. That's what Savitri is. That's what the mother herself is. She, even more than him, is a direct act from the Supreme. Who then is the Divine Mother? And why is she given this central role by Sri Aurobindo? So here we have to think that for various reasons, partly historical, partly intrinsic to being human, we have privileged some understandings of the divine. One of them is that the divine cannot be human, or it cannot be like a human, cannot have any kind of property that is human. So this leads us to the notion of an impersonal consciousness that is completely impersonal. See. Many schools follow that and are comfortable with that. See. Otherwise, you have a even more problematic uh, portrayal of the divine as a divine male, see, an androcentric divine. The divine is a male. And large swathes of humanity find it difficult to accept the divine as a female. See. So this also exists. So along with these kinds of views, Sri Aurobindo's positing of a divine mother is problematic to many people. Firstly, it's problematic to even Indians who believe in the divine mother, but they've obscured the idea of a Shakti avatar. All the Indian texts are going to be talking about male avatars. There's only very sort of hidden, almost esoteric hints of Shakti avatars. See? So to claim that somebody, there have been many claims that some lady or woman is a divine mother of some kind, but it isn't of the pure action of the Shakti, that like an avatar, that notion is not there, or it's hugely hidden. Secondly, idea of the divine as the mother or as the Shakti in an impersonal sense or in a disembodied sense or in an astral sense, even if we say that there is a subtle body, exists in India and in several other places, but over time has been obscured and erased to large segments of humanity. And thirdly, modernity has privileged the mind over all the other parts of our existence. And to the mind, the very notion of some kind of a manifestation is a contradiction of the divine. This is why there is a profound aniconism to many world religions. The whole notion of you cannot make an image of the divine. The divine cannot be represented. The central, sort of holy space in a mosque is a little arched recess with nothing in it. See? Though interestingly, there is a stone at the center of the special building that all Muslims have to bow to, right? So this is the thing, that there is a paradox. This is another one of those paradoxes, a paradoxical coexistence of image and the absence of image, form and the formless, in almost all traditions. See? In some way, form is present in religions that claim formlessness. And in some way, formlessness exists in religions that are attached to form. These two are both present. And in this particular case, when Sri Aurobindo announces the primacy of the Divine Mother, he announces it from the very beginning. It's right in the nationalistic days. It's Bhavani Bharati. It's the nation as a Shakti. It's Kali. It's the Shakti of his record of yoga. It's Krishna and Kali. It's always the two, and and ultimately he'll even come to the point of saying that the central difference between the Gita and my teaching is that the Gita teaches a surrender to Sri Krishna. My teaching is about a surrender to the Divine Mother. It's a very profound difference, because one, the Gita is a profoundly active and dynamic text. It is about action, divine action. And Yet there is a difference. The difference between divine action and Sri Aurobindo's teaching is that this is not just action, it's transformation. It's a complete change in substance that is taking place due to the fact that, as even the tantric traditions will affirm, all matter is the body of the Divine Mother. Everything, all the energies are really her self-manifestation with the divine. That's why we said the divine concentration behind it, chit tapas and chit shakti. This is how he looks at it. And it is not to make a dualism of these things, because in his own life he made his surrender to Krishna. But it was equally to Kali. That's what the record of yoga shows us, that he wanted to arrive at a state where the two were indistinguishable. He calls them Krishna Kali, the one as both. So, is it not more proper to think of something illimitable, infinite, an ocean of consciousness that cannot be limited by forces and names? Indeed, this is one archi-structure in the human approach to God, one in which such relations as we experience are seen, all relations that we experience are seen as meaningless in the absolutism of the divine reality. This approach implies that the world of name, form, and relations in which we find ourselves, a world of finite realities and of temporal realities, a world with beginnings and ends, has no meaning to the divine existence and needs to be erased if we are to experience the Absolute. So we are taken back to that idea of the unknowable, and that there is a gap between the relative and the absolute. The relative exists in a world of relations, and the world of relations, completely is in opposition to the world of the absolute. And so we can either stay in the world of relations, or we can stay in the world of the absolute. God cannot be found in the world of relations, which is made up of finites. God can only be found outside in the infinite. This is a teaching, a logic that is persuasively taught in all the schools that are affirming the impersonal infinite. But there are other spiritual approaches which see this world as an extension, emanation, or embodiment of the divine reality. If the Absolute is transcendentally infinite and thus eternally unborn, unmanifest, its possibilities may issue forth in perennial manifestation. One of Sri Aurobindo's aphorisms is that God is not bound by his freedom. God is not bound by his freedom. In other words, if we think freedom is the absence of all bondages, that is its own bondage. To be free in one's bonds is a greater freedom. So, this is the approach taken by certain schools that believe that this manifestation can be one in which one enters into relations with the divine in his body of qualities, his, her, its, theirs, body of qualities, or gunas, a qualitative relational divine. The divine is the entire world of possibilities in relations between qualities. That is a way to see the divine. Most of these schools that treat the divine in a personal form are schools of devotion, in which the divine person can relate to us as persons or souls. This is again something which modern civilization is kind of allergic to, because we've created this division. We have to look at maps all the time. We have to look at the divine as separate from our physical existences and our emotions and our lives. The earliest Indian proto-philosophies, the Upanishads, give credence to both the impersonal and personal approaches to the divine reality. This is the reason why all the Vedantic schools are interpreting these texts, and they're giving rise to these different views of the divine. And later schools of Vedanta have interpreted the Upanishads to affirm one or other of these approaches. Based on these grounds, in the theistic literature of India, such as the Puranas and Tantras, God is an embodiment of the absolute consciousness who enters this world of relations and becomes all the relations within it as an act of manifestation. This bridging of the two realms, of the absolute and the relative, of eternity and time, of the infinite and the finite, is something that needs a primary or originary relationship. The world of relations is itself a relation between the absolute and the relative, a relation.
You said the primary and another word I didn't get.
Originary, not original, because there is no original. Original puts us back into a linear understanding of time. Originary is that which is a structure of origin, not a point of origin. For the absolute to become relative, we need a first relation within the one. The absolute conceiving of itself as relative. That's the relation. This self-conception of the divine is a two-ness, an internal duality, incomprehensible to mind, but necessary to the origin of a cosmos. The one is always the two. The two are always the infinite. The one is always infinite. Infinity is the name of God as properly as the one is the name of God. This relationship can be seen as one between the divine existence and its own conscious force, Chit, Sat and Chit. It's a reflexivity. If I'm conscious, my consciousness can turn on me, on myself. If I'm infinitely conscious, my infinite consciousness can turn on me and is my equal. Is my equal. Without him, I exist not. Without me, he is unmanifest. Even the existence, she could have equally said, without me, he exists not. It's coeval. It's her way of speaking, but this is equally true. The conscious force of the divine mobilizes itself as the power, Chit and Tapas. Force as Chit, Tapas as power. by which this infinite reality becomes the innumerable possibilities of manifestation. This power is Ananda, bliss. Manifest as the love of the Supreme Beloved and Supreme Lover. This is the content of that primal relation, the originary relationship. The originary relationship is not an abstract relationship. It's a relationship of bliss that as soon as it enters into relation, translates itself into love. The original love.
Books that line and Savitri join time to the timeless poles of a single joy.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. This can be seen as the event horizon of manifestation. The event horizon of manifestation. The condition by which the Supreme Conscious Being invokes itself and becomes the Word. This originary relation is the personal reality of Ishvara and Shakti in the Indian traditions. In the world of relations, so this is to talk about the cosmological background of our existence. But in our existence, all this is hidden. This is not present to us. In the world of relations, how are we to relate to this? Right? If we are to enter into relationship with this being, we have to realize our part in the one supreme relationship. What is our part in it? This originary relationship, this love of the Supreme Lover and Supreme Beloved lives in us. It's our very essence. It is what every being in the relative is. All beings in the relative are relative relations of the one relation. In other words, that one being has become all of us and is also related to each of us as part of the original relationship. This is the way in which Vedanta sees the unity of the one and the many. From Sri Aurobindo's point of view, if the Absolute can represent itself as a conscious being, then we as relative beings can respond to it through our consciousness. Because it is conscious, it can respond to us with its consciousness. It's this relationality in which the Supreme Consciousness is knowing itself and relating to itself. It responds to our consciousness with its consciousness. The one supreme, eternal, conscious existence is infinite and therefore impersonal, but it is also equally and coevally personal because it's a relationship. It is an impersonal person, an infinite person that can approach us or reach to us with an infinite possibility of persons or personalities. This is what gives reality to all the Puranic or other gods seen as true embodiments of this supreme existence. Again, this is a paradoxical idea. This whole idea is a paradoxical idea. One of the images that has been developed in the Indian tradition is the Vishwarupa of Krishna in the Gita, in which this paradox is perceived, is objectified as the being that includes all beings, past, present, and future. These all beings are not wiped out in some mass of radiance, which is also what it is. So, in the description, this is the mass of radiance is what is privileged. It's also, in the kind of famous saying of Oppenheimer when he witnessed the blast, this is what came to his mind almost instinctively, spontaneously. This mass of radiance on all sides. The power and a destructive power. I am death arisen to slay the creatures. And the mass of radiance on all sides. It's wiping everything out by this tremendous radiance. But what Arjuna sees is also and equally and at once all the beings of the universe, all that have existed, are existing and will exist. This paradoxical vision, each one is seen. This is really worth contemplating. It's really worth meditating on. Because in a way we have other experiences like this. People talk about, the whole notion of time. Again, this is related to time. It's like the meeting point of time and eternity. The whole idea of time is quantized, because we can either lead a life of a time in which there is no depth. We seem to be moving from moment to moment. We have no retention. Or we can live a life of a time in which we seem to be all together. All my life is present here, and I'm aware of it.
Isn't that what remember means?
Yes.
Collecting all of the pieces
True.
and putting them back together.
True. That's why memory is ultimately God.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's why the Isha Upanishad ends with that. Oh, will remember that which was done. Remember. This is the originary sense of that which was done, the origin. Go recollect,
Yes.
remember the origin. See? And what happens at that time is that the one and the infinite are experienced together at once. The infinite is not wiped out by the one.
You see, at that time, no time.
Right. At that paradoxical time. So we also know, we're at this time doing a course in CIIS on Bergson and intuition, and he's going to talk a lot about memory and time. And one of the examples that he gives is the near-death experience. He was the president of the Psychical Society at one time in England. So near-death, it was already, we think about near-death experience as a modern phenomenon, but this is 19th century, it was already being studied. And he's making reference to the fact that in repeated cases, in near-death experiences, there's a recollection, a remembrance of the whole life in a moment. It everything passes in front of you. Your entire life, whatever you did, is present. You recollect your entire life. And it is not a recollection that is like a kind of a, sense of the whole, but it is a paradoxical seeing of everything that you did in an instant. This is that. There is infinite resolution to it, a richness to it that includes all the specific relativities of that experience, seen as the absolute. Yeah.
So, since you mentioned that Oppenheimer and the blast, so I was thinking of, what can you elaborate on that, the power of collision? Like, for example, the blast is a result of chain reactions of collisions, right? So, just like you are saying that all these resolutions of this detailed, interrelationship, that can be actually set, turning against each other. So that part, if you
Yeah, turning against each other. This is exactly. This is what's happening, and that's why he sees this image in terms of that aspect of the Vishwarupa, right? Because it is self-annihilation.
Mm-hmm.
It is the annihilation of the relativities and their mutual destruction into the absolute. See? And in that case, what happens is that it's like, you don't have the coexistence of the relativities and the absolute, but only the absolute, because the relativities have annihilated themselves.
and that is also actually a power, like
Yeah?
just not just a whim.
Yeah? It's the release of the power that has become the materials that have gone against each other now.
So I have a question. Why
Yes.
do we have to go either or? Why can't we coexist with both the,
Yeah.
the one and the many?
That's the idea that we are talking about.
Okay.
But your question is, why do we usually do that, right?
Yeah. Why do you want to go origin?
Yeah.
Origin? It's
Yeah.
It's like yeah.
Yeah, because the question that you're asking is the question that Sri Aurobindo is asking. I hope you got that, right? That he's not talking about either or, right? He's talking about how we can experience this. But why do we not experience this is the real question. Why do we have to do anything to experience this, right? That's because of the structure of mind. Mind works by making divisions. That is the nature of logic. If you put yourself in something, everything else becomes its other. The primary example of that is you yourself. You exist to yourself. All of us are images in your mind. We are others. So can you get rid of that? Can you both exist as yourself and others? Can you?
If I'm not using my mind.
No? Even if you're not using your mind. If you're not using your mind, do you feel others to be yourself? Do you have that experience?
Yes, we do share emotions and experiences that are, co-share. Yes.
But sharing is not the same as
Like,
being.
So, for example, I would know that she also has the similar emotions that I have in a given situation.
Yeah, but that's your inference.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Do you exist in her? Do you experience what she is experiencing at the time that she experiences it?
No, because at that time I'm not with her. why
No.
she's experiencing it.
But at any other time, can you experience it? Do you know the quality? Like they say, it is the hard problem of consciousness. A bat has an experience of being a bat. Do you have the experience that the bat has in knowing that it is a bat? It's a very profound question. The real question behind that question is why not? But first you have to realize that that is the essence of our existence.
Isn't that why knowledge by identity is the only true knowledge?
Yes, but we don't have it, right?
But the moment you start using the word why, you're already bringing your rationale to try and understand that. Yeah.
Not
So-
necessarily. If you don't understand it also, you don't experience somebody else. If you were not a human being, still you would not experience the reality of somebody else
But profound,
from the inside.
profound experiences of empathy do give you that to some degree.
It gives you inner contact.
Mm.
It gives you inner contact. That's why Sri Aurobindo has this hierarchy of knowledge. First, there is external contact, which is what we ordinarily are experiencing. I'm surmising that you're experiencing what I'm experiencing, but I'm projecting. I don't know exactly what you're experiencing. I don't have to think about it. I can be a bat, but I won't know what you're experiencing. I can surmise that you're experiencing. And then, as Swaha is saying, there are degrees to which I can contact your experience. There are degrees of intimacy. There are degrees of exchange. It's not fully a kind of a othering. There you may say the mind comes in and solidifies the othering. But it is not just that. There is a more profound, this is the kind of reason why we need to contemplate this. This is the reason why it's necessary to arrive at another plane. Because our ontological existence is conditioned by mind, not our mind. Even the dog is conditioned by mind. Even the stone is conditioned by mind, not our mind. We live in a mental cosmos. Overmind controls this cosmos. And that works by presenting to each existence its own existence as the center of the universe. You are the center of your universe. You exist to yourself. Everything else in the world is a coexistence of something that you don't know. Well, we can stop here and maybe you can take a brief meditation on this fact. Both the fact of the coexistence of the one and the many, which is exactly what we're talking about, and the difficulty of experiencing that, not because of any fault, not because of any original sin, but because of an originary act. That we've inherited and we exist in, but which also awakes an aspiration in us to go beyond to this experience. So maybe we can take a moment and then go for our